Briefly, Abelard tries to understand. Abelard the cat, who's been around, would have his friend Manon believe that life is God inhaling and that death comes when God's nostrils are empty. She says, Abelard, why do you keep hunting with the neighborhood cats? They fight over leftovers and brag of feasts. Who do you know besides bully raccoons, a few skunks and rats? He murmurs, life could be short if God becomes asthmatic. Besides, what else is there to do? She cleans an umber-colored paw and says, one day I swam out to the islands, at the harbor's mouth where seals watch land that never floats away. The water so foreign and willing to feed me to the red-eyed fish circling below. Court a bird, make it your friend, or carry a mouse still warm to the coyote who claims the unlit alley behind the restaurant. See if he thanks you. She lies down under ferns, curling from the ground, and he remembers the time she insisted he listen to the red poppies, pull their petals in at dusk. All he'd heard was the ocean, grieving for something he didn't understand, eyed the crow in the tree for the contents of its shiny belly. Cape Enrage. Only a picture from a blue tin box. The day we shared lunch on a blanket over stones. My mother pouring from a thermos, steam curling like smoke. The cocoa dark as the Fundy tide relinquishing the flats. Exposed mud shiny as a giant's mirror. My footprints trekking through clouds and sky, searching for the spot where the tide turns. In the picture, I wear the moss green jacket my mother sewed for me. Hold my father's hand under a cliff in the cave he told me never dried out between tides. Then the slow drive down a dirt road so narrow we had to shut windows to keep out the leaves, frantic as trapped insects against the glass. Onto the lined, somnolent pavement, leading inland to bed, where I lay thinking of that cave full of ocean, all entrance gone. Grounded. Every year we mimic the stars, rely on lights strung on trees, on shrubs and houses, even basketball hoops. We try to pierce the longest nights of the year with filaments and glass bulbs that flicker in the wind, heat up, burn out. My father and I never considered how far our lights might shine when our fingers were bone-numb braiding bulbs into the cedar trees stiff with frost. Only get them up while his good temper lasted, as undependable as the weather in December. His sudden anger and slamming doors on life, with us to blame, followed by a terrible night sky silence that made our mother feel small. All this in hiding, while going inside to warm up and untangle more lights to string on a tree, trying to settle its branches in our house. Now, years later, I twine lights up the trunk of a tree so big it commands the room and the spirits of our children. My body between the wall and the tree in the smell of its balsam wildness. I still hear his voice circling in patience, feel the silence piled up inside me, like the snow that stays. Once a year, his effort to be jolly, bright as the stars we love, to watch burn holes in the cold and darkness. Mr. Phillips. Some days down the wooden stairs to the basement, to sit in rows in a room with chain-link fencing over the windows. Ready to watch a bony man with a quartz white face and hands teach us music. In his British accent, dusting chalk off his fingers, tapping the music stand with a yellow-tipped pointer. Some notes black and solid, others letting the page shine through their holes. Folding pink sheets of bubble gum into our mouths and sorting Beatles cards, we made fun of this man who separated girls from boys for the sake of voice. We couldn't imagine his life outside that room, for we knew he slept there in his black suit and tie, head pillowed on sheet music, listening. When we returned to school after Christmas, they told us he died from pneumonia over the holidays. For a while we wondered if he'd been dying at the front of that room. All those times he insisted we sing together, underground. By spring, we'd forgotten him, singing our own songs, skipping rope, or clapping hands. Years later, I draw treble clefs and phone book margins while waiting for someone to answer my call. "Will you hold?" she asks from the other end of the line, and the receiver makes music for me. It's then I think of him, wonder how he found passage through the long days in that mill town on the river, what he knew, but couldn't pass on even if we had wanted to listen. The cherry tree. A distant train reminds me of other journeys I've taken. A whistle pulling me towards a family stunned by death's abrupt arrival. And once my daughter and I, through dark hills, pulsing with fireflies and heat lightning, her brother beginning to fill my belly. Now the applause of rain on leaves adds up our days, eases off, a tip-tapping, bountiful murmur. When it stops, the neighborhood kids and blue jays come to strip our tree of cherries. Sudden ammunition, how to spit a pit at a friend, wings flapping, raucous squawking over the fruit and green leafage. Who can argue with sequence? White blossoms, then the cherries, now these appetites. The Onion Mountains. At the foot of the mountain, we found the trail followed by so many before us, angling up to the scent of onions, growing wild as the rocks. We'd been warned of the passes, never the same, the storms praising darkness, the ledges no more than granite funnels for the wind and our bodies. What vegetation grew up there was wrung by the hands of something I never saw, except for the stubborn onions stinging our eyes, bruising our lungs. We tried to stay sure as the old bear following the scent of water, knowing fire burns behind him. But even the strongest among us lay down often. And when we stopped again, our heads swollen, ears ringing from the bells we heard swing deep in the cliffs, someone curse the rocks and their stinking crop. Which is why, at the ravine's edge, I said, why blame the onions? We'd climbed into air, meant only for the birds to spread their wings on. Little bug in the breeze, they called me. Do you know how far your voice travels up here? Your words might anger the sun-wearing clouds, so it too won't lose its way in these mountains. They sent me ahead to gather wild onions, to sell in the villages still some 5 days away and below us. And when we descended, leaving the dull foothills behind, the sun appeared, and the dogs ignored us to bark at the light.